Let's go. Hello everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk with Tom. My name is Tom, and you're watching the Roundtable with Tom on Talking. And this is a show where I casually discuss any show, animated or animated, that I want to talk about. And today I want to talk about The Dragon Prince Season 2, specifically about King Iroh and the role that he plays. But first, I want to thank all the people who go above and beyond to support the Roundtable on Patreon and for channel memberships. If you want to become a member, you can click the join button down below, or you can go to our Patreon for all sorts of perks like shoutouts or your name at the end of all of our videos. Alright, now that we've got the housekeeping done, back to the topic at hand. King Iroh is an awesome character. I've liked King Iroh since Season 1, and all the things I liked about him were amplified in Season 2, even though he wasn't even really around, technically. He was still on screen, but he's not alive, depending on who you talk to. But for all intents and purposes, for me, he ain't alive. Now, the thing about King Iroh is when you think of well-written characters, there are a few things that come into the minds of most people. You have development, you have progression, growth, maybe even redemption. The question is usually, did they go on a journey? And with King Iroh, he didn't really. Yeah, he has his own trials and tribulations, but there's never a point in King Iroh's story where he has to change or develop or really confront anything about who he is as a person to progress. Although there is some development in his backstory, he mostly plays the role of an already developed character. A fully realized person as opposed to a character who has lessons and things they need to change in order for them to grow and serve their role for the story. But King Iroh starts off as a pillar of wisdom. There's not much for him to learn, but a lot for him to teach. And the only real lesson that he learns is that he shouldn't be afraid to care for Callum as his own son, and that it's not disrespectful to Callum's birth father to do so. And unfortunately, because of King Iroh's untimely death, he didn't have a whole lot of time to express that change. Or so we think, because everybody's speculating that he's still alive, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that later. Now, there is, of course, no such thing as a perfect person, someone who has nothing left to learn. They've done everything they need to in life. There are always going to be new things for us to learn about the world around us. There are always going to be new ways for us as people to improve. But the thing is, most characters like Callum, Ezrin, Rayla, or even Soren and Claudia, they're all young and still trying to find their identity. They're still trying to find out what their role is in the world around them, how to fill the shoes they've been handed, what to believe in, and what to stand for. And that's especially a common way to write characters in animation, because animation has a lot of young people watching, not necessarily children, but young people who are still trying to figure out what role they're going to play in the world, people who are confronting these questions about who they are, which usually makes development a requirement for how you write your characters. But even in stories directly aimed at grown adults, there's usually a development or lesson that the characters are expected to experience and learn from. And in any story, there is an expectation that there will be characters who learn in some way. An expectation I honestly agree with, but I don't think that that should apply to every character. I don't think that every single character in a story has to go on this crazy journey or go through drastic changes in order to be a well-written character. So in the context of a character like King Iroh, someone who isn't a main character, but is still a fan favorite and still has a ton of screen time, I don't think that's a requirement that he has to develop. Yes, he does face challenges and difficult decisions, but there aren't many lessons he has to learn with the point in his life that he's at. Though he may have dilemmas and experience loss, those events don't change who he is to his core. They may make him stronger or affect his day-to-day life, but he doesn't have to change who he is to overcome these challenges. Look at King Iroh in contrast to one of our main characters, Callum, who has spent so much of the show questioning his identity, resisting his assigned role as a knight, trying to become a mage because it's something that he feels better suits him, or how Rayla's involvement in the story came from her newfound desire to achieve peace between Exadia and humans, which all stems from her ongoing internal struggle with her identity as an assassin, or Ezrin making the decision at the end of Season 2, which is a spoiler by the way, if you're not caught up, close your ears, making the decision that he needs to stop running and hiding from the changes in his life, and instead confront them by going back to Katalis and taking his place as king. And then Claudia and Soren have to confront so many different twists and turns in their motivations, their sense of right and wrong, and their allegiances, to the point where it's honestly hard to predict exactly what direction they're going to take these characters. Trust me, I know. And even Byron, despite being a grown adult like King Iroh has so many different insecurities and things going on that he has gone through tremendous changes throughout the show. Changes that you can't say about King Iroh. And the reason for this is because King Iroh is already a developed character. He is a grown adult with a ton of wisdom and an understanding of the world around him. So while other characters have to make a point to grow and get better and change in order to confront the challenges that life throws at them, Iroh can move forward and overcome even the greatest of challenges without having to change his core person. When faced with a difficult decision, Iroh uses his life experience and values to be decisive. He is able to follow through on what needs to be done, even if it's challenging. But how can a character like this, that doesn't have any real journey, manage to be so likable or interesting? Well, let's consider some other characters who we can consider to be fully developed people. In fact, let's look at Aaron Ehaez's other show, Avatar: Last Airbender. You had Uncle Iroh, who didn't need to go through any drastic developments because he had already experienced his life and already had these developments before the story started. The only journey that Iroh had in Avatar: Last Airbender was going back to Ba Sing Se and reconquering it for the Earth Kingdom as opposed to conquering it for the Fire Nation. But he didn't have to internally change during the story in order to do that. The Iroh from Book 1 would have done the same thing given the opportunity. Meanwhile, you look at Iroh's nephew Zuko and the role he played in the finale, and that's not a role he would ever play in the beginning of the show. He had to go on that journey to change who he was as a person in order to get to that point. But like King Iroh did not need to change who he was as a person to fulfill his purpose in the story the way other characters would. Both of these characters are very well liked, and I don't think that anyone is going around saying they're poorly written. But by the common rules that people throw around and genuinely believe, these characters shouldn't be good. So why are they? The reason these characters work is because of the role that they play in the story. They are not the main characters. They are not the main characters. They are the pillars of wisdom guiding the main characters, helping them to find themselves on that journey that they are going to go through. Uncle Iroh's purpose in Avatar was never to be the main star of the show, nor did his character ever try to take that role. And the same can be said for King Iroh. Iroh guides the characters trying to figure things out, specifically in the case of Callum. Callum is a young man who is very lost. He's raised to be a knight, but he doesn't feel like that's the right fit for him. Then he wants to be a mage, but because he's human, he has to resort to dark magic because he's told that as a human, he's not able to connect himself to a primal source of magic. And even in his own family, Callum feels like an outcast because ever since his mother passed, he's been reminded that his father isn't his real father.
Because that's what's expected of a prince. Or a step prince, actually.
What?
And one of the main focuses of Season 2 is Callum finally being able to find the confidence to claim his own identity. And that all stems from King Iroh. In Iroh's letter for Callum, he tells Callum with no uncertainty that Callum is his son, and that Callum is a prince. He tells him that he loves him and sees his own qualities in him, and it makes him proud to be his father. He uses this role to help Callum become a better caretaker for his brother Ezrin, and reminds him that strength doesn't come from power, it comes from vulnerability, forgiveness, and love. Then King Iroh's advice is the thing that finally helps Callum break down that barrier to become the first human to practice primal magic without a primal artifact, or whatever it's called. God, I should have researched that specific detail, because that's the specific detail that's escaping my brain right now. The Dragon Prince is a story that I've noticed Aaron Ehaez really likes writing. And that's the story of a bunch of kids who have to carry the responsibility of the world on their shoulders. They have to make real world decisions that maybe they aren't ready to make. And for Callum and Ezrin, they have to do that with the fact that their dad is gone, and they are now responsible for an entire kingdom of people. Which is a big reason why I really don't like the idea that King Iroh is secretly alive. I know all the theories, I know people say that the two-headed snake was a Chekhov's gun, so they had to use it, and his bird was too predominantly focused, and Ezrin's ability to talk to animals, combined with that, it has to come into play. I'm not gonna say this theory is bad, or even incorrect. It might be right. It makes sense. Like, it adds up, and there's no arguing that. But I will say that if this happens, I personally am gonna think it's lame. And here's why. For one, all the stuff I just said about how it's the story of Callum and Ezrin being thrown into a situation they're not ready for, and how it's a story of them being able to come up and take on that responsibility of everything that their situation has demanded of them. I feel like it would undermine that message, and maybe that's me like kind of being like negative or pessimistic or whatever, but that's just how I'm feeling, you know? But more than anything, I feel like it feels a little out of character for King Iroh to take that way out. For those of you who don't know like the theory, it was basically that after King Iroh was telling Byron, I'm not gonna use your soul snake to get out of this sticky situation, because King Iroh, he felt like, you know, I've done some horrible things, like some horrible bad things to Moonshadow Elves, and the fact that they're coming to assassinate me, well, that's just kind of the way the world goes. Like, I've done bad things, I regret them, and now I need to take responsibility, and I can't run away from the situation. And that's why he was refusing, like, I'm not gonna take your easy way out, I'm not gonna let you sacrifice yourself.
I won't hide in the body of another while someone else dies paying the price for my decisions. I would rather die a king than live as a coward.
That position to me is like really admirable, and it says a lot about King Iroh, and it's a big part of what makes his character so likable to me. The fact that he is insistent on taking responsibility for his actions, responsibility for his mistakes. So I feel like to say, when no one was looking, he ended up taking the easy way out. To me, that just feels kind of regressive for his character. And as for the fact that people are like, well, it has to happen because they set all this stuff up, maybe it's a misdirect. Like, maybe you're supposed to think, oh, this is what they're gonna do. And then it's kind of like the episode of BoJack Horseman where they were all like, oh, like, our friend was murdered. That's what happened. Like, he didn't die of natural causes. Like, there was a reason he died. Like, it was this big conspiracy. And then in the end, they were like, no, there was no conspiracy. There was no mystery. He just died. There was no reason he died. His life just ended. And I felt like that was like a really good way of conveying the horror of death. It just happens, and the people who love you have to deal with that. And I feel like putting those characters in a situation where they don't have to deal with it, even though it might come across as cruel, it does speak to those people in real life who are watching the show and consuming the story, who have dealt with that. And it just makes things more realistic because that's just how it happens. And I know we're talking about a story that's like based in fantasy, but this is a reality that I would feel like is important to people who have experienced it. I feel like it's important for people to see characters not be relieved of their loss, but to live the life their loved ones would want them to live. That's about all I got to say. My name is Tom, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching Let's Talk with Tom on the Roundtable, but Tom isn't just on the Roundtable. I have my own self-titled personal channel. I have a Twitter, I have an Instagram, I have a Snapchat, I have all that good stuff. In fact, I even have a Tumblr. So, if you're interested in any of that, check that out, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!